The overall state of college football is in shambles. We are going to tell you why and how. I am Joey Lavelle. This is Briggs McLemore and Dillon Chambers, and we are the Nothing But Sports podcast. Thank you for tuning in. Please like and subscribe. Let us know your thoughts on the overall state of college football. We will also cover some of the coaching changes in the NFL, and it is championship weekend in the NFL leading up to the Super Bowl in a couple of weeks. So we will have analysis on that. And our question of the day, which kind of leads into the state of college football. If you had one change you could make, what is the most urgent change you would make in college football if you were commissioner? So please let us know your thoughts, comment, like, subscribe. We thank you so much for tuning in. We thank you for the support. So leading in, we'll start with the on-the-field product in college football. It has never been better. There's more parity than ever. You've had a lot more closer games. With the expansion of the playoffs, more games mean more at the end of the season. You kind of saw that with Texas playing Texas A&M. Even though they already had 3 losses, they were still really fighting. Granted, it's a rivalry game, but we'll ignore that part for now. So, with the on-the-field product being never better, how can the sport be in such shambles? Well, leads into the first part of the sport being in shambles, the high school recruiting. It kind of leads into the transfer portal. High school recruiting's just absolutely been destroyed by the transfer portal. Coaches don't want to take the chance on unproven talent. It's the same argument in the NFL when you're arguing versus a free agent versus a draft pick. It's unproven talent. You don't know how they're going to react. So if you can fill those slots in free agency, why would you fill those slots in high school? So schools want the plug and play. I think it's really hurt kid development in college. You see that with a lot of quarterbacks and offensive linemen. Offensive line play has been down across college football and in the NFL recently. And when you do have that 5-star that does get recruited by the big school, or even that 4-star, it completely resets the NIL market. So, and I'll give this example and then I'll bring Briggs in. When player A comes out of high school, and say player A comes out of high school in 2023, and his NIL deal is $500,000 a year. We'll just use that as an example. And then we go to 2024. We'll say the market now, what last year was $500,000 for a high school wide receiver. Well, now new 5-star player B gets a $700,000 deal coming out of high school. So player A thinks that he's better and can get more money. And so he goes and enters the transfer portal because he's told he will have a better deal. Even though he didn't play at whatever school, he thinks he can go earn more money because he thinks he's better than player B, who just got a $700,000 deal, versus the new high school kid, or the kid that came in 2023 getting $500,000. He thinks he's worth $800,000 because he thinks he's better than high school recruit player B. So every year the market gets reset and it really becomes a problem for these players. And just high school kids are losing so many opportunities, especially at the big name schools: Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia, Texas, A&M, Oklahoma, the Wolverine, the Michigan, whatever school. They're losing a bunch of opportunities. So I will bring in Briggs. What are your thoughts on the overall state of high school recruiting without dipping too much into the transfer portal? But what do you think are the biggest problems with high school recruiting right now, and why that affects the state of college football?
I think Nick Saban encapsulated it best when he would talk about it. Is a lot of those guys earlier on when the transfer portal wasn't as big, they would go to these top programs, say Alabama, Ohio State, and they would go there to get developed into a better player. Nowadays, the big problem you're seeing is kids from high school are coming in to some of these top programs and wanting to play immediately. And so you see that, and they're going up, they're fresh out of high school going up against guys who are 24 and have significantly more experience than them. And they're simply just not going to get a spot on the 11-man roster on the field. And they might work. I mean, you saw Dillon Stewart 2 years ago for South Carolina. He pretty much worked his way into that starting defensive rotation, but he's just a freak athlete. You don't come across those every single year in the recruiting cycle. And so for that normal 3 or 4 star who's going to some of these top programs, they're not going to play instantly, and they don't necessarily want to take the time to develop. And as they say, all good things come with time. And so when they go and they transfer out, you start to see guys like what's his name, TJ Finley, the quarterback who's been to 7 football programs, which is unbelievable. Not only that he's been around as long as he has, but the fact that he's just bounced around from place to place with absolutely no consistency. You're not going to be able to make it to the next level doing that. And at the same time, the whole reason you're in college is to get a degree, is to earn an education, because a lot of these guys aren't going to make it to the next level. They're not going to be able to go play pro. There's only so many spots in the NFL. And that level of talent is even better than what they're competing with at these schools that they're trying to start at. And so I think that a lot of these young kids bouncing around all over the place is not only bad for football itself, but it's bad for their education and kind of like the rest of, I don't want to say the rest of their life, but being able to progress academically.
Done?
Yeah, I agree completely. I mean, I think it's important for athletes to get like that early exposure, because a lot of what we're seeing with college football now with the NIL, or excuse me, with transferring and everything, is rosters like Ohio State, Michigan, these big teams can go and get players that already have developed and bring them in, and they'll turn over like 30% of their roster year in and year out, and that's what we're seeing a lot of. And I think that, I mean, honestly, to me, it's crazy that high school players, it's almost like they're being undervalued or devalued compared to what they used to be, because now it's not as important. Like, coaches don't worry about high school recruiting as much if they understand that they're getting in some wide receiver that went and had 1,000 yards at a small school last year. They're steps ahead of the guy coming out of the class of 2026. So it undervalues like players that are coming out of high school, and I think it's kind of crazy to me, to be honest, because I think that there should be more like developmental pipelines for these players. Like, you should still be able to go and be a 4 or 5 star recruit and get recruited to bigger schools, but instead it's only like the upper echelon that are still even getting looked at by these schools. Joe?
And we'll kind of move into the transfer portal and the NIL problem with college football, but I think you're seeing two conflicting styles of running your program. And you really saw this in the playoff of Oregon, who's a lot of high school recruiting, versus Indiana, who's a lot of transfer portal. You have Ole Miss, who's a lot more transfer portal, a lot more roster turnover, versus Miami, who's a lot more high school recruiting based. But say for teams like Indiana, where you don't have as big of a high school recruiting base, but you have the NIL, you have a solid coach in place, and you have the booster support behind you, you are able to flip these rosters. And you just saw, this is far and away the most transfer portal based team that has won the Natty. Congrats to Indiana, by the way. If you haven't checked that video out, go ahead and check it out. Our instant reaction to the Natty was released on Monday night. But got off topic there. But it's very conflicting styles and the way you're able to turn over a roster. And now you've seen a lot of teams take the approach that kind of Indiana took, where you get the most experienced guys. I will disclose my biases. I'm a Buckeye fan. Monitored Ohio State's transfer portal situation very much closer, and they had almost 30 guys transfer out, but it was only a couple hundred snaps that transferred out, versus now at the end of this transfer portal cycle, they have more than 1,000 career snaps played coming in. So now I think you've seen big programs start to take that approach where you're just plugging the experience. You're not even trying to build depth at this point through the transfer portal. And I think the one I will get your thoughts on this in a second. I think that the one-time window has done more damage than we thought it would. I think most people that are in the college football world thought the one transfer portal window would help. Granted, they put the window in at the wrong time. It should have been in the spring, and we'll talk about that in a minute. But I think that did more damage. So, moving more into the transfer portal, it has been an arms race for proven commodities in the transfer portal, as I just said. These players are very much desperate for playing time because they think they're better than player X, Y, and Z. So they're thinking, well, why would I just sit at Ohio State and develop when I can go to, say, TCU, who's offering a couple 100,000 more than Ohio State was, and I can start there. So I think this is another thing. No guardrails. That needs to change. No guardrails are really hurting the players specifically and the coaches. There have been 10,500 college football players that entered the transfer portal in all levels of college football. Not just D1 and FBS, but 10,500 in all levels. So that's D1, D2, D3. I think that includes JUCO and
NAIA.
Yeah. And 4,145 entered D1. That was stats as of Tuesday night. Only 2,600 of them, little more than 2,600 of them have committed to a school. That is insane. I believe that is about 62% of players that have committed to their next school. And so there have been so many players over the years that have hopped in the transfer portal. Maybe say a guy from like TCU, maybe a freshman from TCU that enters the transfer portal, and then he just disappears. He doesn't find a roster spot anymore. Or the kid that thinks he has a better opportunity from FAU who got a lot of snaps but just doesn't find a spot anymore. And so it really hurts, and you just see guys disappear, and it happens so much. And I think one of the biggest problems that we have in college football right now is agents. You don't, and Dillon, you know the NFL relatively well. There are no rules for agents. There's no accreditations. You just have to go put in your LinkedIn that you're an agent, and that's it. That's all you have to do. And so these kids, it could be like Briggs could go be my agent for college football. He has no schooling. He has no he has nothing. He has no qualifications for being an agent. And so now you have these jackals posing as agents giving these kids horrendous advice. And they think they're going to go get more playing time. They don't. They think they're going to get a bigger bag. They don't. They just disappear off the face of the earth. And we never hear these kids again. And there have been some pretty good football players that have entered. And now, with these NIL deals, you have players getting sued. You saw that with Damon Williams. He ended up going back to Washington after he got sued. Darian Mensah just got sued. This is one of the most disastrous parts of college football. I'll move to you, Briggs, on your overall opinion on the transfer portal and NIL.
So I think that when the NCAA and the powers that be opened this box, they opened Pandora's box. I think it was a mistake to do both at once. I think it should be one or the other. Now, you can make your argument on whether or not college football players should be paid. And now I think they're being overpaid to the point where it's like now we're starting to kind of see inflation in how much they're getting paid. Joe, you mentioned earlier, player A getting $500,000 out of high school, and then player B, who just came out of high school the next year, getting $700,000. I think we're seeing too much of that, and then the market's starting to get out of control. And we'll get to this later, but I think that there needs to be some sort of structure in the way that the contracts are done, to the point where we're not seeing. It's hard to prove the tampering. Like, it's there, but you can't prove it. So that we see, like, okay, Darian Mensah, he's under contract at Duke for the next 2 years, and he will make this much per year. Whether or not you want to add in incentives, whatnot, that's up to the school, that's up to their athletic program. But to have that structure in place to prevent, hey, he's not allowed to go and enter the transfer portal. If he does, he owes the school this much for a buyout. And given if that's the case, you'll start seeing schools pay for these kids' buyouts. It's not going to be the end of the world for them. But there needs to be more structure than there is right now, because right now there is nothing at all. It's just a free-flowing market, and it's something that needs to be fixed, because if it doesn't, it's going to get out of control to the point where I don't know if we will be able to rein it back in.
I'll make one more point before I let you step in, Dillon. You mentioned student athletes earlier. Everyone forgets the student. Like, I don't really care for graduates because they're not going to school, but everyone forgets the student and how hard this is to be a student when you're in the transfer portal. Granted, your life is pretty much devoted to football when you're a D1 college football athlete, but still, it's really, you have to remember the student. And I think we're heading towards a CBA, and we're going to do a segment on our proposed CBA at some point over the off season, probably coming in the coming months, the coming weeks, more than likely. But everyone forgets the student. And I'll move to you, Dillon, on your take as well.
I mean, y'all pretty much nailed every bullet point I got. I don't want to get too into depth into what I think should be changed, because it kind of goes hand in hand with the question of the day. But like Briggs was saying, something has to change. Like, shouldn't be able to just go to a school, decide, oh, I want more money, and leave. Like, there's got to be contracts. Like, you got to add incentives to for players to stay. Like, something needs to give. And I mean, that's all I've really got. Y'all literally covered everything I've got.
So, and I'll use the NFL example again. We kind of see this with, I'll use defensive ends as an example. I forget which. I think it was Myles Garrett most recently reset the market for. So TJ Watt resets the market for defensive ends, right?
Yeah.
And then so Myles Garrett probably wants more than TJ Watt as soon as he signs his contract. But Myles Garrett can't get more on his contract until his contract is up. That is not the way it is in college football. Myles Garrett had to wait till the end of his contract, and then he reset the market when it comes to defensive ends. And now, when TJ Watt's contract expires, I know there's tons of other great defensive ends out there. It's beside the point. But now, TJ Watt, whenever his contract expires, he will have the ability to go reset the market again. But you have the market getting reset every day. And like Briggs said, there's an inflation on the money. You just had Ty Simpson get offered $6.5 million. $6.5 million to play 1 year at Miami. That is insanity. And I really think a CBA is where we're heading. And I think that will be the best thing for the sport, is so that way you have this all aligned between the coaches, the players, the conference commissioners, all of the moving parts that you have to get in agreement. I think that is the way we're heading. And like I said earlier, I think the one portal window being shifted so early really hurt the cycle, because I think you've seen more wild things in the transfer portal than you really have seen before. So moving into the calendar and the coaching carousel, early signing day was December 5th. The late signing day, the normal signing day for all athletes, is February 4th. We have one transfer portal window. It's January 2nd through the 16th. That ended on Friday last week, I think, something like that. And you had the regular season end on November 29th in college football. You had conference championship weekend, I believe, on December 5th or 6th. I can't remember which one. And so now you have the Lane Kiffin conundrum, which is the most famous example. He wanted to get to LSU or make a decision on which job. He had to make a decision, more or less, by early signing day, because you want the coach to be in place. You saw that really hurt Penn State because they just lost the recruiting cycle because they didn't have a head coach in place. And so now you have the playoffs starting. I believe playoffs started December 19th this year. Regular season ended November 29th. National championship was on January 19th. In the middle of the playoffs, you have the transfer portal window. Conference championship weekend, you have early signing day. February 4th, which is not long from now. It's about 2 weeks from now. You have that coming up. So, and now you have 32 FBS coaches have new jobs because of the cycle being so early. If you can say if National Signing Day was the only signing day was February 4th, and then you have the transfer portal window in April, May, March, whenever. Probably May is probably the best bet, or June. So that way kids can be there for fall camp and you know what holes you have to fill as a coach. But the calendar is just a disaster because, again, it's not what's best for the kids, because now you have to reevaluate where you're going when coaches get fired on November 30th. And then now you have to reevaluate where you're going. Half of these schools don't have set coaches in. So it's just a disaster. You had 17 new Power 4 coaches this year. The coaching cycle was insane. And so the playoffs need to get shrunk. I think that's a thing. I don't think we should be playing the national championship on Martin Luther King Day. Next year, it's the week after Martin Luther King Day. It's on January 25th. So, Briggs, what is your thoughts on the calendar and the disaster that we have as a college football calendar?
So there's a couple different ways we can go about this. We can move the college football season up a week. And that's because it already starts after like the first full week of classes, depending on what school you go to. Everyone starts at different times, but usually it starts after the first full week of classes. And so you can't move it up 2 weeks because then no one's on campus. No one, like those stadiums are going to be half empty. Given a lot of college football teams, at least in the Power Four, are playing non-Power Four teams. They're playing FCS opponents. So if that's something you really want, I mean, you can do that, but you can move it up a week. But then at the same time, you can also probably shrink the season from 12 to 10 games and play your same 8, 9, or I guess if you're doing 9 conference games, play 11 games total. That way you get 2 out of conference games at the start of the year, then you go into your conference schedule. But with the way that the current calendar is, and everyone talks about expanding the playoff, if you want the coaches, because ideally everyone needs to be enrolled in their new school for the second semester. And that's the big issue with the current playoff the way it is you're seeing like the second round of the playoffs starting after the new year when everyone else is getting kind of settled in and getting ready to go to their new schools. Now we're seeing Alberto Mendoza just transferred to Georgia Tech. I've been at school here for a week now. This is my first full week we're about to finish. So how is he supposed to go pack all of this stuff up from Indiana and get down to Georgia Tech and actually get into classes, get enrolled and everything? I understand that he's probably known that he's going to go to Georgia Tech, speaking of the fact that he committed like the day after. So they probably had things in motion there. But we don't need this 3-week break in between the end of the regular season at Thanksgiving weekend or conference championship weekend. Go straight from conference championships, maybe get 1 week off if you want to give guys like a rest, give teams a chance to get guys back from injury. But go straight from that and go into the playoffs, go into bowls. Dude, there's no reason to wait. That way, if you have games in like home field or have home field advantage for the first round of the playoff, students actually are there. That way, when you go home, you're already into the rounds of the playoff where it's actually at set bowl locations, and then no one's missing out on anything.
Done?
Yeah, I agree. I mean, one of the biggest problems with it is like when we get into late November, early December, and the conference championship games are being played, when the college football playoff is going on, you got like you were talking about the Lane Kiffin story. There, it's just chaos when there shouldn't be chaos. There should be an allotted window for all the recruiting to be done for coaching changes. Like Lane Kiffin shouldn't have to not coach in the CFP because he's thinking long term for the future. So I mean, like Briggs nailed it pretty well. Like something's got to be moved, shifted, because the calendar is just it's a mess.
And you talk about squishing the playoffs together, Briggs, or you could just do it like the Super Bowl, where you have 2 weeks off before the national championship, or even 10 days. That would, I think, would be the simplest. Is so that way, in theory, if you want the national championship to be on New Year's Eve, New Year's Day, you could give them 2 weeks off so that way they can go spend Christmas with their families. That way, if they so choose, they can have Christmas, whatever, and then they move in. The only problem that you do run into is the entire Christmas break thing. But like I said, when you're a D1 college football player, your life is football. Like that's just what it is. I would love the opportunity to be a D1 athlete. I'm not, but that is a beautiful, like that is an awesome opportunity. And I don't think most of those guys are complaining about it, but I think that is one of the better ways to shift the calendar. We will put our heads together and kind of figure this out to make a proposition and just throw some ideas out there. Maybe someone will hear it. But you said there's no reason for Lane Kiffin to not be coaching Ole Miss. I think one of the storylines that kind of got overshadowed in the playoffs is how bad teams were hurt by their offensive and defensive coordinators not being 100% committed to the team that they have in the playoffs. You saw it with Ole Miss with Charlie Weiss. You saw it with Brian Hartline at Ohio State. You saw it with Tosh Lapoy and Will Stein at Oregon. You saw it with Bob Chesney. You saw it with John Summerall. Granted, those two didn't really have a chance, but nevertheless, the point still there is in moving into the CFP, I think talk of expansion is really harming the sport. You're gonna water down the regular season at some point because you kind of saw a little bit in the last, like Ohio State didn't. Obviously, Ohio State had to play for the rivalry, but Ohio State and Indiana didn't have anything to play for Week 14, other than the fact to win their rivalry games and go undefeated. I mean, yeah, they played for a Big Ten championship, but both of those teams were getting in regardless. There was never a shadow of a doubt that those teams were going to get in if they lost Week 14. So, you saw it with Texas A&M. Texas A&M didn't have anything to play for because they were already 11-0. They were getting in the playoffs regardless. Now, it harmed them because they didn't get the bye and they didn't get to play in the SEC championship, but they still got a first-round game, home game. So, when you talk about expanding to 24 teams, I think it really harms the sport. There are not 24 teams to win that can win a national championship. There's not 24 teams. I think you would both agree with me on this. There's just no way. And so you're hard pressed to find 16 teams. I think 16 teams can compete. Like I think USC could have competed with Indiana this year. Granted, Indiana was on a very hot streak, but I think Vanderbilt could have competed with Georgia, whatever the seeding would have been. But Like Notre Dame being in the playoffs would have been a really good thing. Notre Dame was an incredibly good team that unfortunately got left out because of the way the structure is. But I think expansion's really harming the sport. The jump from 4 to 12 is already way too much. And now you have the weekly show, which does a lot of harm because now you have had Notre Dame fans specifically squealing and crying about how the committee's rigged and ESPN's rigged, this, that, and the third, and because they were in the playoffs the entire time. And so if you show your hand that early, it kind of harms you. We don't do this with college basketball. They just show, they have the AP rankings and then they have the show to determine the field of 68. They don't have this consistent show every week that's just there to garner TV ratings, garner drama, and all these other things. And the process of rule changing, we have a screwed up calendar. We have the transfer portal that's a disaster. We have NIL that's a disaster. We have high school recruiting that's a disaster. And yet the coaches think that changing the red shirt rule is one of the most important things in the sport. And I know coaches are only looking out for themselves. We have a lack of people that care about the sport of college football. That's just what it is. The CFP doesn't care about the sport. The conference commissioners don't care about the sport. The coaches, they somewhat care about the sport because otherwise they wouldn't have a job. But they don't really care about the long-term health of the sport. They're just trying to go win a national championship. So there is such a lack of people that actually care about the sport. There's so many people in media that don't care about the sport. And I think it's a really big problem because none of these people actually care about the long-term health. You can go throw out a problem. You can go say that the calendar is a problem, and you're on chapter 5 of what's wrong with the sport. I mean, we haven't even – this has been a 32-minute segment, and we haven't even peeled back all the layers yet. So I'm going to quickly get your two thoughts, and then we will move on. I'll start with you, Briggs.
I think you just about covered it. Yeah, I think the red shirt rule, them changing that, I don't want to say it shows us where their priorities are, but it's like you're throwing like a bucket of water onto a burning sky tower, like a burning skyscraper. Like it's not going to do anything to change much of anything other than like, hey, we can keep the high school recruit that we got for an extra year. When
my point is
when
give them an extra year eligibility. Just give them an extra year.
They're likely going to just transfer out anyway. Like the likelihood, I don't know what the stat is. I'm very curious to see if someone can put this together. What percentage of kids are staying with the school they actually got recruited by?
The turnover rate's close to 30 or 40%. It's somewhere in that range.
Well, I don't even think he's talking about that. I think he's talking about how many players, even if they transfer once, how many of them are actually staying with their school? You only really have seen that with the big schools now. It's like the Jeremiah Smiths of the world. Julian Sayin transferred out. He's the starter for Ohio State. Ty Simpson, he stayed at Alabama. Ryan Williams. I don't really know who else. I mean, I know a couple of the Ohio State guys, but I think that was his point. Quickly, I'll get your thoughts, Dillon, and then we'll move on.
In terms of like the whole CFP process, I'm going to go back to the start of the segment when you were talking about how expanding to 16 or 24 teams is crazy. I agree. I don't like a format where losses matter less, where it's almost like there's a redundancy with some of these games because you can go in, like look at Notre Dame this year. They lost their first 2 games, I believe it was, and still almost made it in because of how much more leeway there is. So expanding to 24 teams, you're going to have teams that lose 4 games that are going to make it in, which to me, or maybe not 4, definitely a lot of 9-3 teams that are going to make it in.
Iowa would have made it this year.
Yeah, you
Iowa
see,
was 8-4.
Yeah, exactly. And that's the thing. Teams like that, especially the bottom half of those 24, it's going to be a bloodbath. Like that's all it's going to be. And I think that keeping it at 12 is where we need to stay for now. And like you said, I think 12 might have been a little too much, but overall, I don't like college football where losses just don't matter. Like an 8-4 team should not have a chance to compete for a national championship.
Speaking of a huge loss, the Patriots go to Mile High to take on the Denver Broncos. Let us know your thoughts on the state of college football. We'll answer the question of the day a little bit later. Please like and subscribe. Back into it. The Patriots go to Mile High, take on the Denver Broncos, 3 p.m. Eastern on CBS. And I'll start with the Patriots. Drake May, he's not protected the ball at all. I think he's had 6 fumbles in the playoffs thus far. And so
Yeah.
I think one of the keys for New England is Drake's got to get the ball out quick. They've really got to get the ball out quick. Even though Bo Nix is not playing, the defense is still what it is. I think you could have a problem if the Patriots have 35, 40 minutes of possession, but that defense is still what it is. It's still a top 10 defense. And the Patriots have played top 10 defenses the last 2 weeks, and they've scored 16 points and 21 points, which isn't bad, but I think they've averaged 28 points a game. So not the same as what they had been scoring throughout the year. New England, I think it's kind of self-explanatory. Force Denver to be one-dimensional. They have the number 5 rush defense. Denver has the number 19 rush offense. If they can stop the run and really force Jarrett Stidham to have to throw the ball and kind of let it be on his shoulders, they've done that the last 2 weeks. Those last 2 quarterbacks they've played have been in hell. But Denver has a much better offensive line than both of those teams. So I think stopping the run will be a really big thing. Denver also might get J.K. Dobbins back. I think the pass rush really needs to get after Jarrett Stidham. For Denver, Jarrett Stidham started in 4 games. He's played in 20 overall. In those games, he's had 60.6% completion percentage, 1,400 yards, 8 touchdowns, and 8 interceptions. So they have to establish the run. They cannot put the ball in Stidham's hand. They need to stop the run. They need to allow that pass rush to tee off on Drake May. Hope he makes a couple more mistakes like he did in the previous 2 games where they play against really good defenses. I think they're top 5 in quarterback sack percentage, so they've done well at keeping Bo Nix up all year. If Jarrett Stidham is able to get the ball out quick when he does have to throw, I think that'll alleviate some of the pass rush, but they need to establish the run to do that. The pass rush, like I said, it needs to force Drake May to make a couple of mistakes. Dillon, I'll get your thoughts on the games, and then we'll shoot right to Briggs.
No, I agree. Drake May is going to have to protect the ball a lot better. Like you said it yourself. He's had 6 fumbles through the first 2 playoff games, 16 and 28 points, I believe they scored. So when you look at the Broncos, like you have to look at the fact that they're not playing. They don't have their starting quarterback. This is a team that's going to have to run the ball, and they're going to have to do it well. They're going to have to prevent the Patriots from having 30 or 35 minutes of possession, like you said. They're going to have to run the ball well, and they're not going to have to. They cannot allow Jarrett Stidham to play like C.J. Stroud did last week. I know all those mistakes weren't on C.J., but it's hard to win a game when you just hand the ball back to him over and over and over. So Jarrett Stidham is going to have to lead this team, and they're going to have to run the clock, and they're going to have to just, in my opinion, pound the ball, because I don't see a world where Jarrett Stidham can go and beat Drake May and the Patriots if they can't stay on the field. The defense will be tired, and the offense won't be moving the ball. So, but on the Patriots end, they're gonna have to keep from turning the ball over. That's been the biggest thing in the playoffs. If it weren't for truly how bad the two quarterbacks they played in the first two games have been, they wouldn't have won either game. So,
Briggs?
So, first things first, is this going to be deja vu for New England? I believe the last time they played a backup quarterback in the playoffs was the Philly Special in Super Bowl 52. So, while I personally wouldn't like a repeat there, be interesting to see what happens. Last weekend we saw the Patriots D force 5 turnovers against the Texans. Given both of you guys have mentioned, not all of that was Stroud's fault, but again, there were some mistakes that you can put squarely on Stroud. And so with that, we've seen, and this is something that you just look at football as like a whole, when you kind of insert someone into a very high level or a high level of stress situation in the playoffs, you're in the AFC Championship game, at least you're at home. If this was in Foxborough, this would be a completely different situation. But how ready is Stidham going to be? If the Patriots aren't just a normal walk in the park defense, they're very good rush defense, they're very good pass defense. Vrabel's got his guys ready to go. While the offense for New England is another question. You saw May turn the ball over. He puts the ball on the ground like he's planting flowers. I mean, it's just drop it here, drop it there, drop it there. It's getting bad. And so you look at the New England offensive front and how Will Campbell wasn't really able to hold up well against Will Anderson. And now you've got to wonder, is that Broncos defense going to be able to get home with maybe 4, maybe 5 guys? If so, I think that's going to be problematic for New England's offense. You've seen guys like Keyshawn Boutte. He had a fantastic game last week. He had 3 catches for 75 yards and the beautiful one-handed catch for the touchdown. Is he going to have time to get open downfield? Are you going to be able to get Ramondre Stevenson and Travion Henderson going? They're not going to have anywhere to run if this Broncos front is just going to be bearing down on them the whole game. And so we've seen New England have struggles getting the run game going this year. And this is one of those games where if you can control the tempo and limit the amount of time that Stidham has to be able to get acclimated to the speed of the game. And you've talked about I don't know if those starts were obviously they weren't this year, but I don't know when the last time he played was.
He hasn't thrown a pass since 2023. Yeah.
So game speed is completely different. And that's something we talk about a lot with guys transferring from college to the NFL. So if you don't let Stidham get acclimated, it's going to be very hard for Denver to put points on the board. Now, the other thing, the Broncos need to get the rush game going. You need to alleviate some of the pressure that's on Stidham, but at the same time, the Patriots' defensive front has been one of the best, and they're number 6 in rush defense. They only give up 4.4 yards per carry, and you look at that, but you look at what James Cook was able to do to them last weekend, contrary to what I just said. He had 117 yards, 24 carries, and that came out to about 4.8 yards per carry. But Jaleel McLaughlin and RJ Harvey were non-factors for Denver last weekend. I mean, just nowhere to be found. Bo Nix was your leading rusher. And so if that's going to be the case again, I think it's going to be very problematic for Sean Payton and the home team.
You mentioned the Philly special. I would not put it past Sean Payton. We've seen him pull off some wild plays this year. Would not be surprised if he comes up with something to that effect. So,
if Jarrett Stidham hasn't thrown a ball since 2023, when do you think the last time he caught a ball was?
I would not be surprised if you see a fake punt in this game. I would not be surprised.
A fake punt is different than a Philly special.
But I would not be surprised if Sean Payton pulls out a couple of trick plays. I think there's going to be a lot of motion and a lot of things to make it a little bit easier for Jarrett Stidham to read the defense pre-snap, so that way he doesn't have to focus on as much post-snap. So, speaking of really good defenses, Robert Saleh gets hired at Tennessee, and he's done an exceptional job as a defensive coordinator. You saw his defenses in 2019 and 2020, and then the defense this year, stats-wise, wasn't great, but also lost their top 3-4 players So on that
Bosa and
defense,
Warner.
and got
Yeah.
them all the way to the divisional round. So we'll go back to the last time Robert Saleh was a head coach, and he was with the Jets. I'll kind of recap you a little bit on that. As when Saleh got there, they excuse that truck. When Saleh got to the Jets, they had drafted Zach Wilson. Zach Wilson ended up being a bust. That offense and defense was horrendous his first year. Gets the other year. That defense plays much better, but their defense was top 10 in the league, and I think most stats, at least top half in the league. But they couldn't get the offense going. They were still 7-10 though. And then they hire Nathaniel Hackett, and they get Aaron Rodgers. We all remember the infamous I carry the flag onto the field and then I break my Achilles 3 plays into the game. And so that falls apart. And then the next year, Rodgers comes back, looks very rusty, still doesn't have a lot of offensive weapons, and then he gets fired mid-year. So he goes back with the 49ers. He gets his second opportunity. He could not get the quarterback and the offense right in New York. I think the thing that will determine the success of this hire is who he gets as his offensive coordinator. I think this Tennessee defense will be really good in 2 to 3 years, depending on how they draft and what they do in free agency. But I think who you have as an offensive coordinator to help develop Cam Ward to keep the special with Cam Ward, but not keep Cam Ward special, but get the sloppy and the boneheaded plays out of him. Because if you've watched a lot of Cam Ward, he has made these tremendous plays, but on the 5-yard dig, he misses it, and it's just a mechanical error. So I will throw it over to Dillon. Your thoughts on the Robert Saleh hire, and I will give that one a B. I'll give that a solid B.
Look, you started it off. The 49ers were an upper to mid-level defense this year, despite all the injuries. I mean, Bosa and Warner are the 2 most notable. And I think that says a lot about Robert Saleh's coaching, because we've talked about this. You said you thought this year was Shanahan's greatest coaching job ever. I think a lot of the defensive credit most of the defensive credit goes to Robert Saleh. And the thing with Tennessee is they don't have a talent issue. If you go back and watch literally any year, it's always it's coaching, really, because it's either a good offense and a bad defense or the opposite. Very rarely have we it's missed assignments on every single play this year. It ain't a talent issue. It's missed assignments, it's bad communication, it's inconsistency across the board. Like, don't get me wrong, I understand the roster's young, but that team should have won more than 3 games. 100% should have won more than 3 games. And Robert Saleh is going to come in and build a culture defensively. As long as I think he's going to need a strong coordinator on offense to help develop Ward and to make the offense good again. But defensively, I think they're going to be all right. And he's had questionable results as a coach before. You saw that. But a lot of that comes from not having a good quarterback. Like Aaron Rodgers was rusty his second year there. His first year there, well, he wasn't even there. And it's the limited offensive expertise. I think those will be his only flaws. But if he can bring in a strong coordinator, then it has potential to be a great hire. And I think I'll give it a C, because they didn't address their biggest needs, but I think they addressed obviously a major issue.
Briggs?
I mean, you guys have pretty much put all the icing on the cake there. I will say my one interjection here. You look at what happened with the Jets, and I mean, there's only so much you can put on him for the Jets. I mean, that's pretty much dysfunctional franchise as they come.
Yeah.
I mean, you probably put Belichick there, although that would never happen. And I don't think the results would be entirely different. No one could have planned on Rodgers snapping his Achilles. I think it was actually the second play. I think the first one was a run. The second one, he dropped back to pass it and snapped it then. And then no one could have anticipated Rodgers being kind of I don't want to say mid because he was a little bit below mid, but just unbecoming of what we were expecting of him that second year.
Yeah.
And
Not Aaron Rodgers.
When you have a future Hall of Fame quarterback and your expectations for him are here, but he's performing down here, there's some blame that's going to fall on the head coach. Hey, he's not scheming the right guys up, and he's not getting this play call right, whatever. That's neither here nor there. But at some point, it's like, hey, this is a Hall of Fame quarterback. I expect more from him. We paid him all this money to do a job, and he's really not doing it. So I think this is a pretty good hire. I'm going to go with a B hire. I do agree with Dillon, though, that Titans need to address some more of their key issues. They definitely need to find someone to help develop Cam Ward. He's got a lot of raw talent, but he needs to be developed and molded into something that's going to work in the NFL. So we'll see where they go from there. It's a step in the right direction for the Titans.
I agree.
Dylan, what was your grade on the hire?
I gave it a C, strictly because they didn't, like Briggs said, they didn't address their biggest need. But I mean, it's not a terrible hire. I'm not going to act like it is. I'll give it a C+.
Jeff Hafley gets hired by the Dolphins, and the Dolphins, we know how great of historically when it comes to front office that the Packers have been. They have an incredible ownership group there. The Dolphins hired former vice president of player personnel, John Eric Sullivan, as their GM to the Dolphins. He was at Green Bay. I think first thing in this hire is the very interesting quarterback situation. They had Tua. Kind of seems like he's on his way out. You had Quinn, who didn't look bad, but kind of watching him, you don't feel like he's going to solve the problems. And so I'll give you a little bit about Jeff Hafley. He's been with the Packers 2 years. 1 or 2 years. I believe it's 2 years. But
I think so.
Most recently, he was at Boston College as a head coach. Now, he went 22-26, which doesn't jump off the record at you. But Bill O'Brien was there. I think Hafley's only been there 1 year. And then Bill O'Brien was there this year, and he went 2-10. So only 4 losses below 500. Me and Briggs, we definitely know how much harder it is to win at Boston College. So, and then before going to Boston College, he was co-defensive coordinator at Ohio State in 2019. I have the position that Ohio State in 2019 was one of the greatest teams in CFP history. Probably one of the best teams to never win a natty. Don't look at me like that, Briggs. But look at the stats. Look at the games. Anyways.
I don't think they were beating either one of those national title teams.
If Olave would have ran the right route.
They lost. Wasn't that the year they had the controversial fumble call?
2 controversial calls. Yeah, the controversial targeting and the fumble. And I will die on the hill that they would have competed with LSU. But regardless,
go down a lot of hills.
Regardless. All right, Dylan, what do you think of Jeff Hafley's hire?
I'm messing with you. Keep going.
No. What do you think of Jeff Hafley's hire?
Hey, great defensive coach. I think they had the best defense in the league before their anchor got hurt.
Yeah, what is Jeff Hafley's position of expertise? Do you know?
Defense.
No, what position? What position on the defense? Yeah, exactly. You don't know. Shut up. Anyways. What is Hafley's position of expertise, Briggs?
No.
Yeah, exactly. Shut up. Both of you. Because we want to play games. Yeah, y'all both look like idiots. Anyways, Hafley gets hired by Miami. He was most recently he was the co-defensive coordinator and the cornerbacks coach. You remember those cornerbacks in college obviously didn't pan out as well. Like Jeff Okuda was probably one of the best corner prospects to come out of college. Obviously, he didn't work out, but there was a lot of high hopes for Okuda. Obviously, injuries have hurt him, but there were a lot of stars on that Ohio State team, specifically on that defense. So, and I believe they were a top 4 defense in college football that year. So, brings with him a lot of defensive expertise. I think the quarterback situation will be very interesting. Obviously, with John Eric Sullivan in there, I think him and Hafley would work very well together. There's a lot of rumors tying Malik Willis to Miami, which would be an interesting proposition because I don't think the Packers are moving off Jordan Love. So I think that would be interesting. But I give Hafley they're going in a little bit of direction. I give him a B plus higher. I think he was one of the better candidates out there, but there's only so much we know with him not being a coach in the NFL. Any
I agree.
thoughts or?
I agree. You pretty much nailed it.
I will say my original reaction when the Dolphins fired McDaniel when they did, it seemed to me like they were going to make a strong push for Harbaugh, and I don't really feel as if they did. I think they. I don't want to say they made a half-assed effort. Obviously, we don't know what went on behind the scenes, but the timing of everything going down would have led you to believe, like, hey, Harbaugh's swan song. He can get right off into the sunset in Miami, at least try and make the team competitive. I think they have a lot of pieces in place. I think they're missing a few key ones. You look at Achane, he's been a very reliable running back when healthy. Obviously, Tua is on the way out, but he's shown glimpses of being good when he's not concussed. The issue is that he's concussed most of the time and still playing, which leads him to make very brain dead turnovers. So I do think they need Malik Willis. I think would be a good injection into that offense. Ewers, I think the big problem with him is he needs to be developed more. I think I don't want to say he's got the most raw talent, but he's got a good bit there. You saw in college, he's very capable. I don't think that they've spent enough time trying to build him up as opposed to focusing on what they've got going on with the Tua situation. For the defense, they've been hot and cold. I mean, you've seen games like against the Bills the second time where they looked like they couldn't get scored on. I mean, Josh Allen looked like he was, at least for the first 3 quarters of that game, Josh Allen looked like he was running around with his head cut off. And the rest of that offense was just looking like they had bricks tied to their feet. So you've seen games where they look like they can play, but then we've also seen games where they just go out there and just get smoked by the Patriots. And more often than not, it's the latter. So if they can get things going in the right direction, I know they fired their GM as well. So it'll be interesting to see how they replace kind of those key pieces in the front office and what Hafley's kind of first moves going forward are. What's that look for?
Listen to me. I said they hired John Eric Sullivan as their GM.
When did that happen?
Right before they hired Hafley, like 3 weeks ago.
If you can't tell, I've been busy with school lately.
I literally just said it. What are your grades on the hires?
B.
I'm gonna give it a B minus. I think Harbaugh obviously would have been better had they been able to get him, but for what was available, I think Hafley's a good hire.
I agree.
Sean McDermott fired from the Bills as an extreme overreaction due to the loss in Denver. And Briggs and I kind of touched on this in episode 32. kind of touched on this when it was breaking news, kind of had some time to let it settle a little bit. McDermott made playoffs 8 of the 9 years he was there. He had 2 AFC title game appearances. Brandon Beane got promoted. And this firing feels like the overreaction that Penn State had with James Franklin. And yeah, I know there's not as many parallels, but that's kind of the shock that it felt like when they fired James Franklin. And so you had a press conference today. We are recording this on Wednesday, January 21st. You had the press conference. And Pagula and Bean were in the press conference together. Pagula says his decision to fire Sean McDermott was based off the results in the Denver game. Now, Brandon Beane has said before the season that he thought it was a Super Bowl winning roster. So Brandon Beane gets asked why the Bills fell short of that quote-unquote roster construction this year. Pagula very quickly cuts in and says, a bad call. So we're firing coaches based off the referees screwing you out of the game. That's the argument. Now, the fact that you thought you lost by a bad call rather than your quarterback turning the ball over 4 or 5 times is already
egregious,
horrendous. But the fact that you're firing your head coach on what you think was a bad call. Pagula also said the coaching staff pushed to draft Keon Coleman, which you're just trashing Keon Coleman, and not Brandon Beane. So now you're defending your guy. Brandon Beane, later in the press conference, gets offended at the fact that a reporter asked him a question. I don't know the exact question, but they more or less accused him of a power play over Sean McDermott getting promoted while essentially stabbing McDermott in the back to get him fired, and then getting patted on the head like a good little boy for going to report to daddy. And so Brandon Beane has had 56 draft picks since they drafted Allen. There have been 2 Pro Bowlers on that roster. I don't know if you've seen that stat. I saw it today.
Yeah.
2 Pro Bowlers, Dalton Kincaid and James Cook. Players also found out about McDermott's firing through the media. The owner didn't, and your newly promoted president of football didn't even have the stones to go tell the fucking players, about their 9-year head coach getting fired. So no, this was a absolutely egregious decision, and I wish nothing but bad things on the Bills because this was stupid. It was stupid just like Penn State did it. It's stupid now, and it will forever be stupid. And Sean McDermott will go win somewhere else. Sometimes it takes a while for a guy to go get over the hump. It happens. You see it in college football all the time. You've seen it with Shanahan. Shanahan hasn't gotten over the Chiefs hump. He hasn't won a Super Bowl yet.
It took Andy Reid 20 years.
You saw it with Andy Reid. You've seen it with so many teams and coaches and players, and it takes sometimes a long time to get over the hump. And no one has beef with McDermott from what it sees from the reaction. All the Bills players were pissed right after, and me and Briggs saw those reactions right after we got off from recording because it was the media on Monday. So I don't understand, and go watch the full press conference. I will as soon as we're done here. But from everything I've seen and read and all the clips, an atrocious performance leading into why you fired a head coach who had been successful, made playoffs 8 of the 9 years. How many other head coaches can say that? And
very few.
Sell the team, and Fire Brandon Bean. Brandon Bean should never get another job. I'll go ahead and get your thoughts, Briggs, after a couple of days to let this settle in.
I understand that emotions are high in Denver. I'm still, and arguably, I understand this game went to overtime, and you're going to always hear me talk about it because I sat there and watched it live, and my heart was ripped out of my chest. The 2018 NFC Championship game was legitimately one of the worst no calls. I know you guys heard that from me earlier this week. I know you guys have heard that from me before, probably about 5 or 10 times. The misunderstanding of the rules and the fact that you're trying to be like, oh, this is a catch based off one screenshot is the same way that people take the news out of, or the news takes events out of context when they're covering stuff. It's unbelievable. When you look at the catch, you have to look at him going to the ground and surviving the catch, or surviving the ground as a process of the catch, as you would if he was just trying to catch it in the end zone, going out of bounds, all of that. I understand that you could think that the refs screwed you over or whatever. That is no reason to go and fire a head coach. Has McDermott been, I don't want to say he's been fantastic, but you've consistently been competing for the Super Bowl. You've consistently been competing for the AFC. Now, you've run into the juggernaut of the Chiefs. You've run into, I don't think they got hit with the end of the Patriots dynasty, but
No.
They've been beaten by Lamar. So
And not in the
look at
playoffs.
all of.
It's all the only people he's lost to in the playoffs are Mahomes and Burrow up until this year, but it was just Mahomes and Burrow in the playoffs, I believe.
I thought they lost to Lamar once.
They lost to Lamar
They
last year.
won in the playoffs.
And so
Maybe
you look at all
I
of
missed
these,
it.
and I feel like Joey touched on it. It is a gross overreaction to the game, and I feel like this is one of those things where I understand that you want to get your offseason underway kind of the second that the final whistle blows and you'd be looking towards next season. But with how high emotions were following that game, they're like, oh, we were robbed. I feel like this is a decision you wait 5 or 6 days on and go and make that decision. Now, clearly, as we saw from that press conference, there's, I don't want to say two boneheads in charge of this franchise, but to see how faithful Buffalo fans are and to see how this is the whole thing that's going down, I truly do feel bad for him. I have a lot of friends who are Bills fans, and I know I love to give them crap for it every time they lose. Growing up, we had the saying ABC, anyone but the Cowboys. I lived in a Redskins household. I've been living the saying ABB, anyone but the Bills. So I love to talk trash, but I don't think it, because now you look at the coaching carousel and the timeline that's on, you're so far behind everyone else. All the primo guys are off the board. And like, who are you going to go get now? Because I feel like anyone they hire is going to be a step, if not 2 or 3, below what McDermott was doing, and you are going to get nowhere near the success that he had the past couple of years within the next 3 or 4 from whoever you get next.
We'll make this point real quickly. He also stated in the press conference that they hit a proverbial playoff wall. Do you not remember what your standards were before you hired McDermott? You were the freaking Matt of the AFC East. You were literally not even a step above the Jets. McDermott gave you expectations. Now, Joe Brady is an offensive genius. Don't get me wrong. And he has done a big part of developing Josh Allen. But the head coach deserves to take credit for that too. It mind boggles me. The fact that we've had 10 head coaches fired in the NFL this year, or 9 head coaches fired, 10 job openings, that's a third of the league. You don't have the guys to replace this. Dylan, we'll get your take real quickly before I get any more fired up.
No, look, I think it's a terrible move because, well, you made a great point with what were your expectations before that? And now what are your expectations afterwards? Obviously, it's Super Bowl or bust. That's clearly the expectations. But name a coach who's gonna be able to take the Bills and do what McDermott did. Playoffs, 8 of the 9 years. Like I just it's a step in the wrong direction. And even if they truly believe that a terrible call is the reason they lost that game, why are you taking that out on your coach? Like, how is a terrible call his fault? So clearly, it sounds to me like an excuse from I forget the word bonehead. I'll say it. They are boneheads. I mean, it just doesn't make any sense to me. Not a lick of sense. And that's all I've got to say. I don't even like the Bills. I'm a Chiefs fan, but it made me mad because I don't know. I don't understand the thinking behind it. There was no thinking behind it.
Real quick, I feel like as a Chiefs fan, you should be happy though because now you guys are just going to be able to dog them the next 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah.
Well,
The regular season record will improve.
I think I'll make this point. I forget the part where Sean McDermott turned the ball over 5 times.
Bingo. And
But
it's not. It
if
wasn't.
Joe Brady's taking credit, if you're going to give Joe Brady all the credit for Allen's success, then Joe Brady has to take the credit for when Allen turns the ball over 5 times. And I am one of those people that say, poor Josh. But at the same point, poor McDermott. The guy's without a job. Now he has to move his entire family to another city because you have an idiot owner and idiot daddy's little princess in the front office with them.
Yeah.
And Briggs remembers because Briggs and I were in constant communication when James Franklin happened. I was this heated over the James Franklin. I don't think we covered it as closely, but I was heated when and how much I am willing to think that one, they're going to be worse next year. For one, because I think guys that are coming up are going to leave. Their contracts are ending, they're going to leave. 2, I think that they're, like you said, get a step down. And so I think they're just going to be worse next year. I think it's a disaster. I think it's an overreaction. And McDermott's going to go do something great somewhere else if he so chooses to. So, back to championship football. Terry Pickle and Brandon Bean. Rams go to Seattle, 6:30 p.m. Eastern on Fox. For the Rams, now these two teams have played twice this year already. Rams won the first one in Seattle. The second one was won by Seattle in LA. And I'll go through this quickly. Sam Darnold's turned the ball over 7 times when he's thrown picks 6 times. I forget who the fumble was on. But he's thrown 6 picks when he's played the Rams. The first matchup, it was 21-19. It was more of a defensive style game. And Seattle had more offensive output, but Darnold's turnovers really hurt them in that game. The Rams kick a last-second field goal to win that game. The second matchup, the Seahawks are down 30-16, I believe. They go for 2 in overtime to win the game 38-37. The Rams had more offensive output in that game. So in both games, the loser has had more offensive output. Now, the keys for this game, I think, for the Rams, they got to get Devontae and Puka involved. I think that they're really going to have to really test the secondary and not let Seattle get any momentum, make Seattle rush 4 and 5 to get to them. Devontae and Puka have been great out in space. You got to build Stafford's confidence as well. He's not been completing the ball at a high level in the playoffs. It's been 55%. On the defensive side, they've got to force Seattle to be one-dimensional. They've got to force Seattle to throw the ball. They don't have Zach Charbonnet, who has kind of tore you up in some of these games. and now stop Kenneth Walker and force Sam Darnold to have to throw the ball at a high volume, because when Sam Darnold has thrown at a high volume this year, he's thrown at least one interception for the most part. And if you are able to limit them, you got to limit their explosiveness. They had a couple of big runs in the game that they won from Kenneth Walker. They got to limit Seattle's explosiveness. They can't let Jackson Smith and Jigba have consistent 30-yard plays. For Seattle, you got to use all your weapons out loud. You got to use Cup. You got to use JSN. You got to use Shaheed. You got to use, I believe it's AJ Barner, I think is their tight end's name. My apologies if I got that wrong. And you really got to keep it clean. Sam cannot turn the ball over in this high stakes of a game. You're at home. And the red zone is going to be huge. Seattle has not been excellent in the red zone this year. I think touchdowns, not field goals, in the red zone is going to be a huge stat in this game for both sides. I think they've really got to get some hits on Stafford. Stafford has struggled in the postseason thus far. If you can rough him up a little bit, maybe he'll drop his eyes just a split second so your secondary can react. Your secondary has been incredible this year. And keeping the Rams behind the sticks so they can't get in that 13 personnel where they have the ability to run the ball and throw it. If you can keep them behind the sticks, they'll have to run a lot more 11 personnel. And so that way you have the advantage when it comes to personnel matchups. Dillon, I will move to you. What are your overall thoughts on the game?
Look, I think it's going to be a great one. I think it's going to be a defensive slugfest. Let me just say that because, like you said, we're talking about and Stafford hasn't completed a lot of passes in the playoffs, and yeah, I'm blanking here. But Seattle's defense looks really good. I don't have any guys. I'm fucking blanking here.
I got it.
I don't have any
my
points.
big thing: will the Legion of Boom continue to boom? The first meeting we saw them kind of restrain Stafford. He only threw for 130 yards on 15 of 28 and held LA to 249 yards of total offense. Now, it was a completely different story the second game, in which Stafford threw for 457 yards. And so the big thing is, are they going to be able to contain Puka? And we've kind of seen both the Panthers and now the Bears, they did it very effectively too, make Stafford uncomfortable and force them into these third long situations where it's obvious passing downs. Seattle has a very, very capable pass defense into which they can force LA off the field, limit the amount of time that Stafford and Puka can work. And looking at the weather this weekend, it's not going to be anything close to the misery that was Chicago last weekend. I think it's supposed to be about 38 degrees at kickoff, which is very warm for Seattle this time of year. So again, it'll be interesting to see that. Joey mentioned it before. The turnovers are going to be huge in this game. Darnold having thrown 6 of those interceptions and having 4 in not 4 interceptions, there are 4 turnovers in the game that was 21-19. And I think that cost him the game there. Very interesting to see how that's going to play out. They did play I don't want to say very clean game. They didn't really need to do much of anything after their Cheat Sheet kickoff against the Niners. But will the Rams be able to come into the hostile environment of Lumen Field and succeed? We saw that, I don't want to say struggle, but I do think that Chicago got to them a little bit, especially in those environments where you try and get the crowd into it, those long third downs, especially when Chicago is on offense. And then will Darnold be 100%? We know that he's dealing with the oblique injury. How's that going to affect him? And if he's already dealing with the oblique injury, how is that going to affect his accuracy throwing the ball? We've already seen him have issues with that against LA this year. And so lastly, the third downs, I think, are going to be what decides the game. We've seen both teams fluctuate in their third down percentage on offense. I think whoever wins that battle, whoever is more effective on third down and staying on the field offensively, is going to end up winning the game.
What is your pick to win the game and to cover the spread? The spread is 5.5 for the Patriots and Broncos game.
I've got New England winning and covering the 5.5 point spread.
Done.
Yeah, I have them winning. I have them covering the 5.5 point spread pretty comfortably as well.
I do not have a feel on that game at all, so I would just take New England to win and cover. For the Rams and Seahawks, that spread is 3.5. The last time I checked it might have moved. What is your pick for that? Briggs?
Yep.
I've got Seattle money line, but I think that LA is going to cover. I think it's going to be a 1 or 2 point game. Last second field goal likely.
I will second that. Dillon?
I have Seattle winning, but I think that they'll cover the spread and win by a 4 point difference to a touchdown.
I will say an interesting note of this game. The first two matchups were decided by a combined 3 points. So,
Yeah.
Question of the day, we asked you to comment earlier. What is the most urgent change, if you had one change, you would make in college football? I will start with you, Briggs.
Okay. Don't get mad. I've got 3.
Me too.
I think
Me too.
two of them
Me too.
two of them are very fast, and I know that neither one of y'all are going to say them. First off, pass interference should be a spot foul. I think it should be like the NFL. If you're throwing a 45-yard pass and it's very obviously a catchable ball, you should be able to get the yards. At the same time, I think it should be a reviewable penalty. That players should sign contracts with the school similar to NFL so that there isn't constant stream of free agency, and you shouldn't be having to recruit your own players year after year after year to be able to keep them. And lastly, less freaking commercials. Come on now. I am tired of, hey, touchdown, commercial. Take off, another commercial. We have 5 minutes of commercials in 35 seconds of game time. Cut it out. I'm tired of it. Going to games every weekend here at South Carolina, the average game length went from like 3.5 hours to I've been there for 7 hours. It's unbelievable. Now, given we had one game where it was like 9.5 hours due to a weather delay, that was a miserable day. What was supposed to be a 7:30 kickoff was like a 9 o'clock kickoff. One of the most miserable days of my life. But yeah, pass interference is spot foul, some sort of contracts to limit the free agency that is the transfer portal, and let's get rid of these commercials.
So, you want to make it just like the NFL. That's basically what you just said. You want the game shorter. You want
because the NFL
just like the NFL, and you want contracts just like the NFL. So you are the people we talk about when we say people don't care about the sport. Moving on to you, Dillon.
So, okay, like Briggs, I have 3 points, but they're quick. And you guys are the college football. Hey, I already told you I had 3 points. You've had time to process this. Anyways, so
just don't listen.
You guys are the CFB experts. You can weigh in and maybe tell me if this is stupid, but introduce like some type of cap in some capacity, like some type of salary cap in some way. 2, introduce rules on the amount of transfers permitted. Me and Joey have talked about this a little bit, like some type of rules. It was off the record. We talked about like rules on transfers and how that would work.
The transfers per minute.
Permitted. And fix the calendar. Like just overall, so take action and fix the calendar like we addressed earlier. Those would be my 3.
So I would overhaul the entire calendar of college football, starting from week 0 to get rid of week 0 for one. Week 0 is stupid. I like week 0 as a fan, but it's stupid. Get rid of week 0. You don't need it. And just make it into another bye week. I think teams should get another bye. And then you just squish the playoffs. You move the transfer portal window. You move National Signing Day, all of the things you would do to fix the calendar. You fix the calendar. These meetings for playoff expansion should not be happening as we're playing the national championship game. So I would fix the calendar. Moving on to best bets. I was 3-3 last week. I had the Rams plus 3.5. JSN over 90.5 receiving yards. She is at least 98, I think. 98 or 95. in the first two. I have Purdue money line over Illinois on Saturday. Avs -1.5 against the Flyers on Friday. Caps and Oilers over 6 on Saturday. And a Taba, Gauthier, and Sean O'Malley moneyline parlay on Saturday. Now, our goals of these bets are to be -200 odds or shorter. A lot of the lines, like for college basketball, NHL, NBA, etc., are not out yet. So if those do end up being high by the time the game starts, our bad.
I went 4-2 last week. So far, first place, number one. A little bit of a brain lapse. I originally thought I was 5-1, so I'll take it. I've got Seattle money line as well as Matt Stafford over 256.5 pass yards. I think he's going to just chuck the ball around. I think it might turn into an offensive shootout. I've got New England -5.5 against the handicapped Broncos. Caps money line at Edmonton. I know Joey just took the over. Hopefully it's Caps winning 7-0. Buffalo Sabres money line against the Islanders Saturday early afternoon. And lastly, the Alabama Crimson Tide taking down the Tennessee Volunteers at home in T-Town men's basketball.
All right. So last week I was 3-3 as well. But to get it started off with this week, so for the NFC Championship game, I've got the over for 47.5 points. For the AFC Championship game, I have the under 42.5. Give me Luka Doncic over 32.5 points against Denver this weekend. Give me Ramondre Stevenson anytime touchdown. Kyron Williams over 65.5 yards. And I got Drake May hitting the over of 231.5 pretty comfortably.
Thank you all so much for tuning in. We really appreciate it. If you find some value in what we said, have anything to say, please like, comment, and subscribe. We really appreciate all of you for joining. And have an amazing weekend, and we will see you next time. God bless.